Think about the last time you read an ancient myth. Or, even just an old religious text.
Right, you go in with a certain expectation.
Exactly. You expect a very specific flavor, right? You expect to read about gods throwing lightning bolts or seas dramatically parting.
Yeah, or deep sweeping poetry about the human soul.
Right. You expect metaphors, lots of majestic, ethereal language that, requires a theologian or a philosopher to decode for you.
Because that is the framework we've been handed for thousands of years. I mean, we anticipate the language of mysticism.
Yeah, we're looking for moral guidance, mostly.
Exactly. If an ancient text describes the sky, we just assume it's a spiritual allegory for heaven. We certainly aren't looking for a topographic map.
Right, it's supposed to be poetic.
Poetic, exactly. But what happens when you open a book that is, over 2,000 years old? A book that has literally been buried in desert caves and locked behind iron doors for centuries.
And instead of flowing poetry, you find what reads like a municipal zoning report.
Yes, it's astonishing.
And not just any zoning report, but this highly technical, obsessively categorized observation report for the atmospheric conditions of other planets.
It completely shatters the lens through which we are taught to view ancient history. I mean, when you encounter a text like this, it forces a profound reckoning.
It really does.
Because the manuscript we're examining today isn't just a weird historical anomaly. This is a document that was systematically hunted down and erased from Western consciousness for over 1,500 years.
Erased. And the truly fascinating part, it wasn't suppressed because it said something heretical about, the moral nature of God.
No, not at all.
It was erased because it was entirely dangerously specific about the physical architecture of the cosmos.
Which is wild.
Okay, let's unpack this and look at exactly what we have here. We are digging into the incredibly detailed research compiled in a project called Enoch Unsealed.
Right.
Specifically, we're looking at their documentary transcript titled "The Book of Enoch Reveals the Truth About Life on Other Planets and What Lives on Each One."
That's the one.
And I have to tell you, as someone who reads a lot of history, this genuinely threw me. We're talking about a text that predates the New Testament by centuries.
Centuries, yeah.
Yet it contains descriptions of what sounds exactly like gas giant biology and structured atmospheric ecosystems.
Well, what's fascinating here is, and it's critical to establish this right out of the gate, we are not framing this as some sensationalized late-night debate about little green men.
Right, no tinfoil hats here.
Exactly. This is a rigorous investigation into ancient taxonomy. We are looking at a text that demonstrates undeniable physical corroboration across multiple independent ancient manuscript lineages.
Which is huge for historians.
It is. And just as importantly, we're looking at the very real, highly documented institutional suppression of those manuscripts. I mean, this isn't just about what the text says.
It's about the centuries of concerted effort spent trying to ensure those words never reach the public.
Precisely.
Which brings us right to you, listening right now. I want you to reconsider everything you think you know about ancient knowledge.
It really flips the script.
It does, because what happens when ancient observations vastly outpace the scientific vocabulary of their time? And maybe, more importantly, why do powerful established institutions spend centuries trying to erase highly specific ideas from the historical record?
It's a great question.
To understand the shock of this text, we can't just jump into the words. We first have to talk about the vault.
Oh, yes. The physical locations.
Right. We have to talk about where this book actually lives physically today.
Yeah.
Because you can't just stroll into your local library and find the unredacted original.
No, you absolutely cannot. The physical preservation of this text is a story of extreme isolation and, honestly, intense guarding.
Guarding.
Yeah. To find the complete text, we actually have to travel to Aksum, Ethiopia, specifically to the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion.
Okay, I've heard of this place.
Right. Deep inside that complex, there is a leather-bound manuscript sitting behind heavy iron doors. And I don't mean guarded metaphorically by tradition.
You mean literal guards.
Armed guards. They have protected this specific text, night and day, for over 1,000 years.
Wait, armed guards for a book?
Yes.
That alone tells you the perceived value and really the perceived danger of what is written on those pages.
Exactly. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved the complete unredacted Book of Enoch in their ancient liturgical language, which is called Ge'ez.
Ge'ez, right?
Yeah, and they did this while the rest of the world was actively burning it or pretending it never existed.
But it isn't just sitting in Ethiopia, right? Because for a long time, I know Western academics tried to brush that off.
Oh, absolutely.
They tried to say, oh, that Ethiopian text is just a medieval forgery. It's an anomaly, some weird local fan fiction.
That was the standard academic line, yeah.
But then 1947 happens.
1947 changes everything in the world of biblical archaeology. So Bedouin shepherds are out in the blistering heat of the Judean desert, right?
Right.
And they stumble into these caves above Qumran near the Dead Sea, and they find these ancient clay jars.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Exactly, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the arid, incredibly dry climate of those caves acted as a natural time capsule.
Preserving stuff that would normally turn to dust.
Right, it preserved parchment and papyrus that would have rotted away anywhere else on Earth. And when scholars finally get into those caves, secure the fragments, and start the grueling process of cataloging them.
Which took decades, by the way.
Decades, yeah. But they don't just find a tiny passing reference to Enoch. They find 11 separate, distinct copies of the Book of Enoch buried among the community's scrolls.
11 copies. Just to put that in perspective for you, that is more copies than most of the books that actually made it into the standard Bible we read today.
It's staggering.
The people living at Qumran weren't just casually aware of this text, they were obsessed with it. It was foundational to them.
It was central to their entire worldview, and the physical evidence is just undeniable. We are talking about specific Aramaic fragments. Scholars designate them with codes like 4Q209 and 4Q201.
Catchy names.
Right. Very poetic. But these fragments are currently held under strict climate control at the Israel Antiquities Authority in Jerusalem.
Okay.
And the carbon dating and paleographic analysis on these are crucial here. They definitively date back to between 200 and 100 BCE.
So centuries before the Gospels were even a
What
thought.
before? This completely destroys the old academic argument that the Ethiopian text was some later medieval invention or, a Christian interpolation.
Right. You simply cannot fake a piece of parchment from 200 BCE sitting inside a sealed jar in the desert.
Exactly. And to make the web even more complex, we also have to add the Greek Akhmim fragments to this puzzle.
Right, the Greek ones.
Yeah, these were discovered in a grave in Egypt in the late 19th century, and they've been preserved at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo since 1886.
So let's look at the map here. You have Aramaic fragments in Jerusalem, you have Greek fragments in Cairo, and the complete Ge'ez manuscript guarded in Axum, Ethiopia.
Exactly, 3 corners.
This is what fascinates me. Let's say we're in a courtroom, okay? If I have 3 isolated witnesses who have never met,
Right.
who speak entirely different languages, who lived in completely different centuries, and they all take the stand and give the exact same, highly specific, impossible testimony.
As a jury, you have to sit up and pay attention.
You have to. But let me push back a little here, because I know what a lot of people are thinking.
Sure.
If this text is just a myth, just a fairy tale about angels and the heavens, wouldn't the myth naturally change and drift as it passed across all these different cultures and centuries?
Like a game of telephone.
Exactly, like a massive historical game of telephone. Someone translates it into Greek, they add a little local flavor, then it goes to Ethiopia, they add some of their own folklore.
Right.
Doesn't the story warp?
See, that is exactly what you would expect to happen. That is the natural life cycle of mythology.
Right.
When you are dealing with folklore, the poetry drifts. The metaphors evolve to suit the local culture. The god of the sky in one culture becomes the god of the storm in another.
Makes sense.
But that is emphatically not what happens with Enoch. In manuscript studies, this level of tight, unyielding consistency across independent traditions, it's called corroboration.
Corroboration.
Yeah, you have 3 separate linguistic lineages, Ge'ez, Greek, and Aramaic, You have scribes separated by vast deserts, massive mountain ranges, and centuries of
Who
time.
literally could not have checked each other's work.
Right. Yet the core content, especially the highly technical descriptions of these other worlds, remains remarkably identical.
So they weren't taking creative liberties.
Far from it. What's fascinating here is that it strongly implies these scribes were not copying subjective poetry that they felt free to embellish or adapt.
They were treating it differently.
Exactly. They were meticulously, almost fearfully, copying something they believed to be a rigid technical record. The fear of mistranslating a data point outweighed any desire to make the text sound prettier.
Wow, they were treating it like data, which completely changes how we have to read it.
It does.
Because once scholars authenticated the age of these fragments in the 1950s and 60s, they actually had to sit down and translate them. And the tone of the text is what completely shocked modern academia.
Oh, they were not ready for it.
We really have to redefine the genre of what we are looking at here. Specifically, the sections known as the Astronomical Book, which is chapters 72 through 82, and the Parables, from chapters 37 through 71.
Yes. When we look at the work of researchers who spent decades in the 1970s working directly on those Aramaic Qumran fragments in Jerusalem.
Scholars like Joseph Millick, right?
Yes, Millick, who is at the École Biblique in Jerusalem, and Florentino Garcia Martinez at the University of Groningen. Their conclusions were paradigm shifting.
How so?
Well, when you read the critical editions they published, they noted something very specific that defied expectations. The sheer astronomical precision embedded in these chapters.
The math of it.
Exactly. The text talks in fixed intervals. It details recurring cycles, deliberate geometry, and fractions of orbital paths.
Which isn't typical for ancient texts.
Not at all. The consensus among these scholars was that this was not something a shepherd or a farmer in the ancient Near East could have just invented while staring up at the stars around a campfire.
Right. When I was going through the source material for this deep dive, the analogy that immediately came to my mind was the difference between reading a bus schedule and reading a romantic poem about a journey.
I love that analogy.
Like if you read a poem about traveling, it's all about the wind in your hair, the feeling of the road, the longing in your heart. It's totally subjective.
Right.
But this text, it reads like a cold, hard bus schedule. It's just this object arrives at this coordinate, at this interval, it remains for this duration, and it departs, period.
That is a perfect analogy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains why the text is so disruptive to historians.
Because it doesn't fit the box.
Exactly. It is the fundamental difference between speculation dressed as scholarship and an actual rigid observation report. The language used in these specific Aramaic fragments when describing the movement of celestial bodies is the language an engineer uses.
An engineer?
Yes. It's not someone guessing at the majesty of the heavens. It's someone recording a mechanical reality. And that is a very difficult thing for a traditional historian to accept when the text is carbon dated to 200 BCE.
Because it implies the author had access to a vantage point or a data set that they simply shouldn't have had.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. If this is an observation report, we have to ask, what exactly is Enoch observing? And this takes us into the cosmological claims that made this text so profoundly dangerous to Orthodox theology.
A dangerous stuff, yeah.
Let's look at chapter 40. Enoch describes being, and the text uses a very specific word here, stationed above the earth.
Stationed.
Wait, stationed.
Wait.
Like a satellite. Because normally in these ancient texts, prophets are, swept up in a whirlwind, or they fall into a deep dream, or they have a vision. Stationed sounds incredibly clinical.
That word is critical, and you hit the nail on the head. Stationed. It implies a fixed, deliberate vantage point. It isn't a fleeting dream state.
It's an observation deck.
Basically, yes. The lead translators who have worked on the gold standard commentaries for Enoch, like scholar George Nicholsburg in his 2001 Hermenia commentary, they point out that in this section, Enoch is observing a distinctly layered structure of the cosmos.
Layered structure.
Right. He's not just looking at heaven as some vague, cloudy, uniform realm where God sits on a throne. He is looking at distinct, separated layers of reality. And crucially, each layer contains distinct forms of created life.
And this is where English translations have historically done us a massive disservice, haven't they?
Oh, completely.
Because they blur a crucial linguistic distinction. When we hear the English word angel, we just lump everything supernatural, everything with wings or light, into that one bucket.
It's a catch-all term for us.
But the Aramaic text draws a hard, fast line between two very different types of beings. It differentiates between the holy ones who serve a throne, who are essentially emissaries, and the native inhabitants of these different spheres.
Exactly. The rule to remember here, as the text lays it out meticulously, is this. A messenger passes through, but a resident belongs.
A resident belongs.
Right. The English word angel actually comes from the Greek word angelos, which literally just means messenger. A messenger is someone on an errand. But Enoch isn't just describing messengers, he is describing populations. He is describing permanent residents of other spheres.
I have to ask, why is that idea, the idea of residence in other layered structures, so much more terrifying to religious authorities than the idea of angels?
That's the million-dollar question.
Like, we accept angels perfectly fine, they're on greeting cards. So why do residents cause a theological meltdown for the early church?
It comes down to taxonomy and divine exclusivity.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. A messenger implies a closed system where God sits at the center and sends agents out to humanity. It keeps Earth, and by extension humanity, at the absolute focal point of creation.
We are the main characters of the universe.
Exactly. We're the main characters, and angels are just the supporting cast sent to help us. But a resident implies a localized ecology. If there are residents of other spheres, they have their own existence, their own purpose, completely independent of Earth.
It decenters humanity.
Precisely. A theology built on one God and one single creation event, centered exclusively on Earth, cannot easily absorb a document that casually describes heavily populated worlds elsewhere.
That makes total sense.
And when theologians point this out, that this residential distinction was exactly what threatened the ancient church, they often find themselves marginalized.
I read about this. Margaret Barker, right?
Yes, Margaret Barker. She wrote a brilliant book in 1988 called The Older Testament. She argued this extraterrestrial taxonomy was a direct threat to the early church's power structure.
And what happened to her?
Well, instead of being debated on the merits of her linguistic analysis, she and others like her are often quietly blacklisted. They simply aren't invited back to mainstream academic conferences.
Just for pointing out what the ancient Aramaic actually says, that is wild.
It is.
And what is on the page gets even more granular. We aren't just talking of the broad philosophical concept of residence.
No, it gets very specific.
Enoch moves into hyper-specific physical, biological descriptions of these beings and their environments. This is where it gets truly wild. I want to take you to chapter 60, to a place Enoch categorizes as the place of the luminaries.
Ah, yes. This is where the preservation by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church becomes invaluable.
Because the Western versions left it out.
Mostly, yes. Most Western translations quietly abbreviate this chapter or smooth it over, but the Gi's text preserves it in full.
Thank goodness for those iron doors.
Seriously. And when linguists like Ephraim Isaac in his 1983 translation finally looked closely at the Ethiopian text, they pointed out something incredible about the vocabulary.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
The specific word used in Gi's for luminaries in this passage is not the same word used anywhere else in the text to describe stars or planets or standard angels.
That is profoundly weird.
It is.
Because the text explicitly notes that this specific word implies beings that carry light internally. It is not a reflected light. It's not like the moon reflecting the sun.
No.
The text literally translates to living radiance. When I read that, it stopped me in my tracks. It implies they are treating light as a biological byproduct, almost like a deep-sea anglerfish or a firefly, rather than a spiritual halo.
Right.
Am I reading too much into that, or is Enoch actually describing biology here?
You aren't reading too much into it at all. It is a physical distinction, not a spiritual metaphor. As you said, like bioluminescence. They don't generate heat like a fire does. They generate a living radiance.
Living radiance, wow.
And the ancient scribes who were copying this across centuries understood that this was a highly technical term. They didn't swap it out for a more common everyday word for light.
He didn't dumb it down.
No, they kept that exact bizarre technical word intact across these Greek and Aramaic traditions.
Because you don't mess with the data.
Exactly. When scholars analyzed these specific fragments, there was a paper by Torleif Elgvin at Hebrew University in 1997. They explicitly stated that this biological framework, this specific vocabulary of internal living radiance, has zero parallel anywhere else in ancient Jewish literature.
None at all.
None. It doesn't borrow from older myths. It is entirely unique to this specific observation report.
And once you admit that the text is attempting to describe an alien biology, the whole Orthodox house of cards starts to tremble.
It really does.
But it doesn't stop with just the biology of beings, does it? It extends into the environments themselves.
Oh, yes. The zone reports.
Right. If we look at chapter 77, Enoch gives us what translators identify as a geographical survey of the inhabited heavens.
A geographical survey. Just let that sink in. He is not describing a spiritual journey. He is mapping territory.
Right. Again, my building inspector analogy. Enoch is filing zone reports.
Yes. Translator Michael Knibb, in his 1978 Oxford Critical Edition, really brought this to light.
Let's walk through these zones because it is entirely clinical.
Yeah.
He breaks down the cosmos into 4 cardinal regions. In the north, he catalogs an environment characterized by something called the Stone of Cold.
The Stone of Cold.
Now, for most of the 20th century, theologians just waved their hands and said, oh, the Stone of Cold, that's just poetic imagery for winter.
Right, because how else does a 20th century theologian interpret a literal stone of cold suspended in space? They default to poetry because they lack the astrophysical framework.
Exactly. Then Enoch describes the east as the source of the waters above. The west is designated as the setting of the great luminaries. And modern translators point out that this phrase is a technical designation, an operational zone, not just a flowery description of a sunset.
Right, it's functional.
But the south, the southern region, is the one that really messes with people.
Oh, absolutely.
The source mentions James Bruce, the Scottish explorer, who actually managed to smuggle 3 copies of the Ethiopian Enoch back to Europe in 1773.
A very brave guy.
Yeah. When he read the description of the southern region, he reportedly found it deeply, profoundly disturbing.
And for good reason.
Enoch describes it as a region of living wind. And he says the inhabitants of this region do not possess the stillness of matter.
The stillness of matter. That is a phrase that demands a massive pause.
It's haunting.
Let's unpack what that actually means physically. Enoch is categorizing a physical property here. He is matching a class of inhabitant to an environment.
Right.
If the environment is living wind, which implies a fluid, dynamic, entirely atmospheric space, then the inhabitants of that space cannot have the stillness of matter. They cannot be solid.
It can't be terrestrial.
Exactly. They cannot have bones or stone or soil.
It is a literal zoning document written in the 3rd century BCE for a universe that our modern science is only right now, today, beginning to map.
It's incredible.
Think about what a building inspector does. They walk into a structure, they check the concrete foundation, they classify the HVAC system, they note the occupancy limit. Enoch is doing that for atmospheric layers in deep space, and he had to invent a completely new language to do it.
And that brings us to the crux of the linguistic analysis in chapter 43.
Let's get into the linguistics. Yeah.
This is the section detailing the names of the lights. When the top authorities on the Dead Sea Scrolls, scholars like James Vanderkam at Notre Dame in 2012, analyzed this text, they noticed that the naming conventions Enoch uses for these luminaries aren't random.
It isn't just a list of pretty names.
No. They follow a strict, mathematically encoded system. Each name dictates a role, an origin, and a governed domain.
The analysts say the system was too organized to be ornamental. It wasn't decoration. Someone designed that system.
Yes. And scholar Emile Proesch at the École Biblique took it further. When linguists looked at the actual Aramaic root structures of these names, what they found is staggering.
Okay, what did they find?
Well, in Semitic languages like Aramaic, words are built on triliteral roots, usually 3 consonants that form the core meaning of a word. It's like the linguistic DNA of the language.
Right.
But the root structures used for the names of the lights in Enoch do not appear anywhere else in known ancient texts. They are what linguists call a private vocabulary.
Let me stop you right there, because I want to make sure we really grasp the weight of this. A private vocabulary.
Yes.
To invent entirely new Aramaic root words isn't like teenagers making up new slang. It's like a chemist inventing a new base element on the periodic table, because the thing they're holding in their hand literally does not exist on Earth.
That is a perfect way to put it.
You don't invent new root words if you are just writing a campfire myth about angels. You just use the existing words for angels and light.
Right. You'd use the words everyone knows.
Exactly. You invent a private vocabulary when you encounter a system or a physical reality that completely defies the language you have available to you.
Exactly. You invent a private vocabulary because no existing word fits the physical reality of what you're observing. If you see a creature made entirely of gas, the word bird doesn't work. The word angel doesn't work. You need a new root.
Blowing my mind a little bit.
And this is where the ancient text slams violently into 21st century astrophysics. The private vocabulary of Enoch is describing physical realities that we only discovered in the last decade.
This is the part of our deep dive that absolutely floored me, because it stops being an ancient history lesson and becomes a modern science lesson.
It really does.
Let's talk about NASA. Let's talk about the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. In 2017, a team led by atmospheric scientist Nicole Lewis published a major study on the atmospheric dynamics of gas giant exoplanets.
Right, these massive Jupiter-like planets orbiting stars light years away from our solar system.
How exactly do they model that, and what did their data show?
When NASA studies gas giants, they use complex spectroscopic data to model the thermal and atmospheric circulation. They aren't looking at solid ground. They are looking at sheer fluid dynamics on a planetary scale.
Just massive storms.
Exactly. And their data modeling described planetary environments where sustained, highly organized atmospheric circulation patterns, massive, structured storms and wind bands, could theoretically support complex, organized structures entirely without solid surfaces.
Without solid surfaces.
Let me repeat that. They found organized, persistent, structured wind systems.
Which is almost word for word the concept of the living wind Enoch described in his southern region.
It is.
Now, obviously, the NASA paper didn't reference Enoch. I mean, why would an astrophysics paper cite a 2,000-year-old apocryphal text?
Right, they wouldn't.
But the fluid dynamic environment they modeled mathematically matches Enoch's observation perfectly.
And the scientific parallels don't stop with gas giants light years away.
It gets closer to home.
Much closer. In 2021, researchers at the Carl Sagan Institute at Cornell University, working with Sarah Seeger from MIT pioneers in exoplanet biosignatures, published a groundbreaking study on the upper atmosphere of Venus.
Right next door in our own solar system.
Exactly. They were looking at chemical anomalies in the clouds that could theoretically sustain microbial life.
Life suspended permanently in the toxic cloud layers of Venus.
Correct. Organisms that would be born, live, and die entirely within an atmospheric layer, never, ever touching a solid surface.
Wow.
The scientists noted that such life would need to be fundamentally different from anything terrestrial. From a physical standpoint, it would carry no solidity. It would be in perpetual motion, perfectly adapted to a purely atmospheric existence.
Wait, no solidity, it'd have no stillness of matter.
Exactly.
The exact phrase from Enoch chapter 60. That phrase has just been sitting in a parchment manuscript for 2 millennia.
Just waiting for science to catch up.
If you grabbed a guy off the street in 300 BCE and told him to make up a scary creature that lives in the sky, he's going to say, it's a giant eagle, or it's a dragon with scales,
Right, because he relies on terrestrial biology. He imagines something with bones.
But Enoch didn't give us a dragon. He gave us a highly accurate atmospheric biosignature. He gave us no stillness of matter.
It's undeniably specific.
So if this text perfectly describes the atmospheric biology of a gas giant and the chemistry of Venus, why wasn't this the foundation of early science? How did we lose this?
Well, this raises an important question. You lose it because it poses an existential threat to the people in power.
Oh, right.
If you were an institution whose total authority is derived from being the sole arbiter of a single Earth-centric creation, an atmospheric biosignature from a gas giant is dangerous.
It means you aren't the center of the universe.
Exactly. Which brings us to the architecture of erasure. How do you hide a universe?
You do it systematically, and you start early. The suppression of this text isn't a conspiracy theory. It has a heavily documented, very public paper trail.
It really does.
The foundational moment is the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. That is where church leaders formally gathered to decide what was scripture and what wasn't.
And they removed Enoch from the list of approved reading.
They declared it dangerous.
Yeah.
But they didn't just ban it. They specifically targeted the cosmological sections to discredit them.
To understand the mechanics of this cover-up, we have to look at the two men who largely engineered this erasure in the 4th century.
Okay, who are we talking about?
First, Jerome, who was tasked with translating the official Latin Bible, the Vulgate, around 400 CE.
Big job.
Huge job. Jerome was brilliant, but he was also deeply political. In his prefaces, he goes out of his way to attack Enoch, dismissing the author as an antediluvian fantasist and calling his work the ravings of a madman.
Wow, tell us how you really feel, Jerome.
Right? And then you have Augustine, who is arguably the most influential theologian in Western history.
He wrote City of God, right?
Yes. And in City of God, Augustine explicitly rules that Enoch's accounts of other inhabited regions could not be reconciled with proper theology, and therefore they should not be taught. Period.
I mean, that's a historical kill shot.
It really is.
You have the guy who wrote the official Latin Bible and the guy who essentially architected Western theology, both pointing at this specific book and saying, burn it.
Yeah.
But here is what fascinates me. They didn't really care about the stories of fallen angels, did they? Those concepts survived in other texts perfectly fine.
So what exactly were they targeting?
What they found completely intolerable were the zone reports.
It's a science.
The physical classification of multiple populated heavens. A vision of a scary, fiery angel can be easily dismissed or absorbed as subjective mysticism.
Right.
But a taxonomy, a rigid physical classification of named populations and their biological properties, that asserts a rival reality. It's not a dream you can interpret away, it's a data set.
Exactly. And a data set that contradicts your worldview has to be actively destroyed.
Because data doesn't care about your theology. And the tragedy is that early institutional bias bled directly into modern academic neglect.
It did. It carried right over.
Fast forward from the 4th century all the way to 1906. An Irish biblical scholar named R.H. Charles produces the first major English critical translation of Enoch.
Right.
He is looking at the manuscript, and he openly acknowledges that the astronomical and cosmological sections are the most ancient core of the text. He explicitly calls them pre-Maccabean, meaning they are the oldest, most foundational part of the tradition.
So he knows how important they are.
Exactly.
But what does he do? He doesn't ban them. He's a modern scholar, but he buries them in plain sight.
Oh.
He uses such heavy academic bracketing, so much dense formatting and qualifying footnotes, that anyone reading his translation would just skip right over the zone reports because they look like garbled nonsense.
Wow.
The psychological effect on the reader was practically identical to Augustine's 4th century ban.
So Jerome did the cultural work of making it seem crazy. Augustine did the institutional work of making it illegal to teach. And scholars like Charles did the academic work of making it invisible.
That is exactly what happened.
It is a stunning, multi-generational legacy of neglect. It's not an accident. Scholar John Collins at Yale Divinity School, writing in 2016, stated plainly that the cosmological sections of Enoch are the most systematically ignored portion of ancient Jewish literature.
He called this neglect striking.
Striking. He pointedly did not call it accidental.
And this brings us to the present day, because this isn't just a story about ancient monks and dusty 20th century academics. The cover-up, the gatekeeping, is happening right now in the 21st century.
The iron doors in Ethiopia remain closed.
They do. And the epicenter of this modern resistance is still Axum.
Now, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church deserves immense credit, obviously. They are the only institution on earth that preserved the text in full for 1,500 years when everyone else wanted it dead.
Absolutely, we wouldn't have it without them.
Their gaze version contains specific behaviors, specific environmental data, and specific knowledge possessed by these beings that simply do not exist in the sanitized, fragmented Western versions.
Right.
But they are fiercely protective of it, to the point of absolute stonewalling.
In 2019, a well-funded European documentary team applied for access to the restricted manuscript archive in Axum. Their goal was simply to film the complete text in high resolution for historical preservation. The church authorities acknowledged the request, reviewed it, and then flatly denied the permit without explanation.
And it isn't just documentary crews looking for B-roll being denied. It is top-tier, globally recognized academics.
Oh, definitely.
The source notes a scholar from the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, Lorenz Stuckenbrock, who gave a conference presentation in 2021. He shared portions of his correspondence regarding that Ethiopian archives.
Yes.
He noted, in very polite, measured academic terms, that the archive contains material that has never been included in any published edition of the text in the West.
He knows there's unpublished data in there. So he submitted a formal research inquiry to get access to study the linguistics.
And what happened?
The reply he received simply stated that access would need to be coordinated through ecclesiastical channels. And as of his presentation and through to today, that coordination has never happened.
The doors did not open.
The data remains in the dark.
And then you have the weird academic chilling effect in the West. The source mentions a scholar working with a Swayan collection in Oslo back in 2018.
Right, one of the largest private manuscript collections in the world.
Yeah, and they have Enoch fragments separate from the Qumran caves. This scholar starts publishing preliminary analysis of these exact cosmological passages. They announce to the academic community that a major comprehensive follow-up paper is coming.
And then silence. Absolute silence.
Nothing.
The follow-up paper never appears. The scholar's institutional webpage is updated shortly after, and Enoch is abruptly dropped from their active research interests entirely.
That is just very weird.
Now, as an analyst, I focus on patterns and data. I am not prone to conspiracy theories. But this pattern of avoidance, stonewalling, and suppression surrounding this specific cosmological text is undeniable.
It really is.
It was concluded at that Munich conference that this text violently resists symbolic interpretation. Metaphor simply does not cooperate with such a technical, precise, and consistent vocabulary.
Because you can't read a zoning report as a poem. It doesn't work.
It really doesn't.
So what does this all mean? Let's take a breath and synthesize what we've uncovered today in this deep dive.
Let's do it.
We started in the blistering desert caves of Qumran, with Aramaic fragments older than the New Testament. We found an ancient scribe acting not like a prophet, but like an engineer, meticulously recording fixed celestial intervals.
Right.
We discovered a completely private vocabulary, new linguistic roots, invented solely to describe alien biologies and atmospheric domains.
The data is all there.
We saw modern NASA exoplanet models, and the Carl Sagan Institute independently described the exact gas giant wind systems and suspended microbial environments, the no stillness of matter that Enoch cataloged 2,000 years ago.
2,000 years ago.
And we tracked how two influential men, Jerome and Augustine, managed to delete this entire cosmological data set from Western history, leaving the true, complete text locked behind iron doors in Axum, to this very day.
I want to be very clear about our conclusion here.
Yeah,
As analysts of the source material, we are not claiming that the Book of Enoch is a literal, confirmed extraterrestrial travel guide that proves ancient aliens visited Earth.
right, that's not what this is.
What we are claiming, based entirely on the factual reality of the manuscript evidence, is that the precision of the text is real. Its shocking, unexplainable alignment with modern planetary atmospheric science is real.
It's mathematically there.
Yes. And the deliberate, centuries-long institutional suppression of this specific taxonomy is undeniably real. Whoever wrote Enoch saw something, or had access to knowledge of something, that fundamentally terrified the institutions of his time and ours.
For you listening, this deep dive is a reminder to critically examine the filters through which you receive accepted history.
Absolutely.
We are taught to view ancient humans as superstitious primitives, just looking up at the stars and making up fairy tales because they were afraid of the dark.
But the evidence we just walked through suggests they might have been far more capable of documenting the true physical mechanics of the cosmos than we have ever given them credit for.
The arrogance of the present often blinds us to the precision of the past.
We assume because we have the technology now, we are the first to understand the data, but the manuscripts suggest otherwise.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Something we touched on, but that opens up a massive unexplored door. If ancient scribes possessed a highly specific, unique Aramaic vocabulary, a private language designed strictly to describe the names of the lights and their distinct biological domains.
A language that is now totally lost to modern translation.
Right. What else is sitting right now in our historical archives?
That is the question.
What other texts are currently being dismissed by academics as just ancient mythology, simply because we haven't yet discovered the physics or the biology required to understand the zoning report?
We just don't have the science for it yet.
When you look up at the night sky tonight, remember someone long before you already filed the paperwork.